Welcome to MacStories Unwind, a weekly review of everything MacStories and more. Today's show is brought to you by Better Touch Tool. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right. It's the end of the week, and we have a lot of things to run down, so why don't we dive right into it? Because we have some app reviews, we've got some news, we've got a good mixture of different things. Why don't you, lay the first review on us?
All right. So a few days ago, you reviewed version 5 of Home Plus. Home Plus it's a power user HomeKit app. So if you are one of those people with plenty of accessories in your home, just like John, and you want a better way to organize all of your accessories, your groups, your automations, this is the app you need to take a look at. So Home Plus has been around for a few years. Version 5 gets a new design that's more in line with the official Apple Home app. So you see more tiles, you see these grids of accessories, of scenes and groups. Personally, I think it's more approachable than the Home app. I think it makes a better use of colors, better use of all these colorful icons for different accessories. And I think the developer, Matthias Ochgatterer, did a really good job in trying to strike a balance between consistency with the Home app, but also keeping Home Plus existing personality. So I think it really works visually speaking. Obviously, what stands out in Home Plus is the functionality. And this has always been kind of a strange topic to explain. So Home Plus is capable of creating home automations based on the official HomeKit API. So it's not doing anything strange on your device.
Right.
It's based on the official HomeKit framework. These automations you can create in Home Plus, but you cannot create them in the Home app itself. So it's almost like HomeKit as a framework has a lot of features that developers can take advantage of, and Apple isn't. So in
Right.
Home Plus, you can create these automations that are based on thresholds, which are really useful. You can do things like if the humidity level raises above 40%, turn on my dehumidifier. Or you can do things like if my temperature indoors is between 15 and 22 degrees Celsius, run these actions. So all these data-based thresholds with multiple conditions, they are based on the HomeKit API. You cannot create them in the Home app. You can set them up in Home Plus, and once you do, they will show up. They will show up in the Home app. It's very confusing, but yeah, this is the only way to create these automations. In version 5, there's also a new favorites view. The favorites also sync with iCloud between devices, so you will find them on your iPhone, on your Apple Watch. You can create folders for your automations. So if you have a lot of things happening automatically, you can now organize them in folders. There's smart groups, which is a really nice way, for example, to find all of your lights, for example, and change their colors or turn them off and on. And lastly, you can back up your entire HomeKit setup, which I know, John, that this it didn't come in handy because you had a major HomeKit and iCloud related disaster a few months ago. Home Plus 5 was not around to help you then, but I guess you will be running this backup functionality going forward.
Yes, I have absolutely done that and stored away a backup on iCloud Drive. So that's nice. I mean, there are other apps that have this too, but Home Plus 5 is my favorite app for kind of power user features with HomeKit. So it's good to see backups there as well.
Yeah.
I did another review this week, which is kind of a hands-on first impressions of the Insta360 One X2 camera, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but it's the
No, it isn't.
it's the version 2 of a camera that's been around for a little while, and this one came out in the fall. But what was new this week was that Insta360 is doing a special exclusive kind of starter kit bundle with Apple that you can get on the Apple Store, and I got a chance to try it out, and I was really impressed because it integrates better than just about any of these sorts of accessories that I've seen with Apple hardware. So you can use your iPhone or your iPad as a viewfinder for the camera, and you can use your Apple Watch to control the screen resolution or take, photos and video with it. And it even has an AirPods integration where you can record, you can do voiceover narrative over your video using AirPods and actually control the camera with voice commands through the AirPods. So it's deeply integrated with Apple's hardware, as well as having a bunch of apps that you can use to edit the video and share it and do other things like that, both on the iPhone as well as on the Mac. So it's a pretty neat camera, and if you're looking for a fun way to kind of push your photography forward in a way that's really not possible with the cameras on a mobile phone, because this has dual 360 cameras, or like fisheye lenses on each side of this camera that fits in your hand like the size of a candy bar. It's really amazing what it does, and it takes like 5.7K video, so you can get some really interesting shots with this and play around with different perspectives and views based on the footage that it shoots. Another thing we saw come out this week, Federico, was that Maps dropped a new feature on us in iOS 14.5. And what's interesting to me, one thing, just kind of a meta thing that's interesting to me, is that Apple is now kind of spreading out the news about things coming to betas a little bit. And part of that, I think, is that a lot of these things are service-based. So this is an update that came out that just kind of showed up one day, a couple of days or 2 or 3 days maybe after the iOS 14.5 actually came out. It just showed up on people's phones because it's server side. And now you can report accidents, hazards, and speed checks directly inside Apple Maps. Now, this works on your iPhone as well as in CarPlay and Siri. And when I first went out to the car to check this out and try it in the CarPlay part, because I sat at the kitchen table and fiddled around with it, reported an accident from my kitchen table. And then I got in the car, drove around a little bit, and looked for the UI. And I was a little confused because on the iPhone, it's in that little card that slides up from the bottom. But on CarPlay, it's a small button on the far right side of the screen, which is a little odd because CarPlay has a very similar UI to the iPhone in that there are these kind of card-like interface elements on the left side, closer to the driver, but it's not tucked away in there, which was a little odd to me. But, it is only the first beta, so that's to be expected. I mean, I kind of hope that gets rethought at some point. But it's a nice feature, and presumably these things will start showing up, or you'll be driving around and you'll see, oh, there's an accident up ahead. I mean, it's a little early. I was trying it within hours of it showing up, so I didn't see anything in my area. But presumably, once enough people are using the beta, you'll start seeing that sort of thing in Maps as you drive around as well.
Right.
Another thing we linked to this week was an article in Business Week by Austin Carr and Mark Gurman, which is kind of an overview of the Tim Cook era of Apple and really compares and contrasts what Cook has done since he became CEO after Steve Jobs' death. And there's not a lot in here that's really struck me as particularly new, and if you follow Apple closely, but it's a terrific overview and a good reminder of kind of what has happened since he became CEO. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, it's perfect for the weekend because it's kind of a long story and a great overview of what Tim Cook has done in his time as CEO.
Speaking of betas, I want to mention one of the new features in iOS and iPadOS 14.5. You will soon be able to change your default music streaming service. So a couple of users noticed this on Reddit a few days ago, and Mac Rumors reported. We'll link to the original reporting by Mac Rumors on MacStories. The way that it works right now is a bit unclear. I've been doing some research. I've been doing some tests with this feature, and it looks like you will be able to set up using Siri. So there is no page in settings to do this. You need to do this via Siri. But you will be able to change your default app for playing music and playing podcasts. It seems that this is based on the existing SiriKit Media Intense API. So Apple is not doing anything special like they did, for example, for changing your default music streaming service on HomePod. That appears to be a separate thing. However, you will be able to change your default music player in Siri. The first time you ask to play music, Siri in 14.5 will ask you which of these apps you want to use. In my case, for example, I saw a screen that contained Spotify, Apple Music, Castro, which is a podcast player. I also saw other users seeing Dark Noise,
yeah, I got that
which is not a podcast player. It's not a music player, but it's using the SiriKit Media Intense API for playing white noise sounds. So it shows up. And once you do, for example, in my case, I set up Spotify, then you can search for songs, you can play songs, you can shuffle playlists. Really well done. Kind of broken in some regards right now. For example, you cannot like songs, you cannot add songs to playlists. And it says, for example, Spotify hasn't added support for these commands yet. So very early support for this feature. I assume we're going to hear more on this front over the subsequent betas of 14.5. As I mentioned, right now, there isn't even a page in settings to confirm that you changed your default music player, like there is one for, say, your email client or your browser. So we're gonna stay tuned on this front. We're gonna see the changes that Apple brings in this for this feature. I assume they're gonna talk about it because it seems like free publicity for a thing that they were attacked, by the press and governments for several years. So I assume we're going to hear from Apple PR on this feature eventually.
Right. I got to imagine that it'll show up in settings eventually, because I was a little confused at first because I tried it with Siri and then I went hunting around in the settings and there's nothing to find in there. So that was kind of interesting. On the club this week, we had a bunch of stuff. It was a really good issue. I did a collection of screenshots and screen recording apps. And there's some new things in there because I've been changing the way I do some of that, especially on the Mac. So check that out if you're a club member. And Alex did a favorite, and his favorite was GameTrack, which is an app that I've reviewed in the past, and that was one of our runners-up in the 2020 MacStories Selects for best update, I believe it was. But yeah, it's a terrific app for tracking your video game playing. So that's Alex wrote about that as well. And you had a little something about widgets, didn't you, Federico?
Yeah, I wrote about some of my recent modifications to the home screen, some of the widgets that I reconfigured, some new widgets I'm trying, some changes to the timery widgets that I use for time tracking, how I set up my today page. It was a fun column to do. And as I mentioned at the end, my home screen is still in flux. It's still like, there's so many widgets still coming out. And like developers are still iterating on their implementations of widgets, adding more options, adding more themes and styles. And I'm still not sure what I want from my home screen. And so every few weeks I go in there and I fine tune and I tweak it a little. Then I try it for a couple of weeks, see what sticks, see what doesn't, and then I change it again. And it's fun. The home screen was kind of feeling stale for the past few years, and now it's, every couple of weeks there's something new I want to try. It's a fun time to be an iOS user. And boy, I cannot imagine what I'm going to do once all this stuff comes to iPadOS, hopefully.
Yeah, that would be pretty great. We also had another episode of MacStories Unplugged this week, and this was a fun one where, first of all, I told you what I call a productivity parable. And
it was a parable. Yes.
It was a parable. And then we talked a little bit about Boston slang and Italian regional accents. And I quizzed you about a bunch of words that are used in Boston and to see if you could figure out what they were. And I went back after we recorded that and found a really good video that goes over a lot of this. And I forgot one word that I really should have quizzed you on. So as a bonus, as a little bit of a taste for what MacStories Unplugged is like, I want you to tell me what Bang-A-Yui means.
This was from the video you sent me, and I skipped it.
I was wondering if you'd watch the whole thing, because it's near the end of the video, I know.
Bang-A-Yui?
You will never figure this out.
I don't know, fireworks. Is it fireworks?
No. I'll give you a hint. It has to do with driving your car.
Is it like driving with a manual stick?
No. I will tell you, Federico. It's making a U-turn.
Why would you say Bang-A-Yui? Okay,
Bang-A-Yui.
sure.
That's what they say in Boston, all right? And it's very true. I did check this one with Jennifer too, and she agreed that we should have included this in the Unplugged episode.
Okay, so this is a teaser for the things you're gonna hear on Unplugged. This
yes, all
quote
sorts
unquote
of Boston
English
slang.
words that they're using in Boston. Okay.
Exactly. All right. So also this week, we, of course, had App Stories where we talked about our iPhone and iPad accessories, which is something you and I have never really talked about. And there was an awful lot of Apple product accessories in there, but as well as some other things that we use as well, and including a couple of that we decided were failed experiments. So check that out if you want to see what we're using with our iPhones and iPads right now. Federico, this episode of Unwind and all of Mac Stories this week is brought to you by Better Touch Tool. Better Touch Tool is an indispensable Mac app that has really stood the test of time. I looked back, and you wrote about this app back in November of 2009, which is when MacStories was about 6 months old or so, I think. So it's been around for a long time, and it started out very simply as an app that it's still known for today, which is customizable gestures for MacBook trackpads and the Magic Mouse. But it really does an awful lot more than that today. Not only does it do all kinds of new gestures for trackpads and mice, but it also supports other kinds of input devices. For instance, you can fully customize your touch bar. And really, it's the kind of customization that I wish Apple would do, because the touch bar really doesn't work that well for a lot of people. But with Better Touch Tool, you can make it work really well for you in particular. There's also all sorts of keyboard shortcuts that are possible with Better Touch Tool, including a very new feature called Hyperkey, which lets you bind multiple buttons for mice and other things to a particular key on your Mac. It's a pretty neat feature. Better Touch Tool offers a very long list of predefined actions, so you can automate all kinds of tasks, or you can create your own. So it really is the kind of tool that I think is easy to get started with when you think, oh, I wish I could do this by tapping 3 fingers on my trackpad, and then explore what the options are that are built in, but also start thinking about how you can do more yourself. There's also a big community of users that are at community.fallavora.ai, which is the website where you find Better Touch Tool. And the community is a great place to go and find different uses for the app that others have tried before. You can get Better Touch Tool with a 45-day free trial, which is great. And you have 2 different kinds of licenses. There's a lifetime license, but there's also a 2-year license, which basically gives you all of the updates for a 2-year period before you're asked to upgrade. For a limited time, you can get 20% off on Better Touch Tool by using the coupon code MacStoriesBTT. That's MacStoriesBTT for 20% off at checkout for Better Touch Tool. Our thanks to Better Touch Tool for their support of Unwind and all of MacStories. All right, Federico, we've got to do our Unwind picks. What do you got for me this week? I think I know. I know exactly what you have for me because we were talking about this last night.
Well, it's kind of obvious. Obviously, I am picking the latest Super Mario game for Nintendo Switch, and specifically the new expansion. So yesterday, actually, I guess today was yesterday for me because
it's very confusing. It was yesterday for me. It was today for you.
Yes, it's very confusing. Super Mario 3D World, which originally came out on Nintendo Switch in 2013, 14?
Something like that.
One of the best 3D Mario games in recent memory that unfortunately didn't find a huge audience on the Wii U because, not
many people bought it.
Not many people bought the Wii U, but it was an exquisite Mario game, really, with support for multiplayer, the introduction of Cat Mario, really well done game. Nintendo brought that game, just like many other Wii U games, to the Switch. So there's a Switch port of that game. But in addition to the full original Super Mario 3D World game, this Switch version also includes a spin-off game called Bowser's Fury. And the whole premise of Bowser's Fury is that this is Nintendo's first approach at an open-world Mario game of sorts. You're obviously controlling Mario. There's the plot of the story, if you want to call it such, is that Bowser's went crazy and is now a giant Godzilla-like Bowser, and you need and Bowser's Jr. asks for your help to help his dad go back to normal, whatever. In any case, what's great about this game is that unlike previous Mario games, you're not picking levels, you're not picking stages. There's no central hub. Like the Peach Castle, for example, in Mario 64,
right?
Or the home planet in Super Mario Galaxy. Instead, everything switches seamlessly from island to island. So you're taken in this world made by a bunch of islands connected to each other, and there is no single central hub. There is no choosing levels. You just walk and jump around and you move from island to island. And it's sort of like open world. When you enter a new area, you see the name of the area, you see the objective. You need to collect, instead of stars, you collect these cat shines, which are basically like golden bells that help you in your quest to defeat Bowser.
Mhm.
But what really sticks out here is that you're moving between these stages in a way that you're not like choosing from a menu. You're not returning to the hub and then going to another place. You just keep walking and you just keep exploring. And because of this approach, you can choose to go one way instead of another. And you can do one area before the other. It's really well done, really seamless. It doesn't like it doesn't feel open world in a way that, you know, like Ubisoft games may feel open world.
Right.
It feels like a Mario game. And within that sort of a micro universe of the island that you arrive at, it's still self-contained in a way that it feels like a level with its own rules, with its own enemies, with its own peculiarities. But then you just move on, and you keep. And on the horizon, you can see the other islands that have opened up. It's really well done. I played for like a couple of hours. Obviously, it's a lovely Mario game. The music is fantastic. There's some excellent jazz renditions of popular Mario songs. So go check it out. It's included in the 3D World version, in the Switch version of Super Mario 3D World. And if you haven't played Super Mario 3D World, which is a more traditional Mario game, wherein you have a map and you go from stage to stage, that is also an excellent game. One of the best games on the Wii U, an underrated Mario game for sure. So go check out both of them. But if you played, like me, Super Mario 3D World years ago, you probably want to start with Bowser's Fury.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me, especially the aspect of moving from island to island in kind of an open world way, because that's very unusual for a Mario game. That's a totally different take. I'm looking forward to trying it. I actually have some Mario amiibo coming later today that I'm going to use.
Nice.
That I'm going to use with the game. My pick this week is "Flowers for Vases," which is a Hayley Williams album, and Hayley Williams has been busy. I think. There was a Hayley Williams album last year as well, and this one's very different. And I think I, on balance, like this one a little better. This is more of an acoustic album, very much focused on the vocals. Hayley Williams, of course, is the singer for Paramore, and it's just a very relaxed, quiet album that I've found is the kind of album that's really easy to work to. I've listened to it 3 or 4 times now over the course of the last couple of days, and it's really good. There's a lot of good music that came out in the last couple of days. I'm pretty happy because it seemed like January was a bit of a drought for new releases, at least ones that I like. And all of a sudden there's new stuff coming out again, which is terrific. And I'm sure we'll have more picks as a result for the coming weeks, because I know you and I had a couple of ones we were talking about earlier today.
Yeah.
All right, Federico, that's it for this week. I want to thank our sponsor again. That is Better Touch Tool. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net and Club MacStories. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.